She counted the fries one last time, silently, because counting out loud would have made the hunger too real. 6 fries. That was all that remained on the cracked white plate between her children. Tiny golden sticks of salt and heat, cooling too fast beneath the restaurant's bright lights. Elena kept her hands folded in her lap, fingers laced tightly, as if they might shake if she let them rise. The plate looked almost laughable at the center of their small table, like a joke whispered too softly for anyone else to hear. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with noise, forks clinking against ceramic, chairs scraping, laughter spilling easily from tables that didn't have to think twice before ordering extra sides. Warm yellow lights hung low from the ceiling, soft and flattering, the kind meant to make people linger and spend. The smell of grilled meat and buttered bread drifted through the air, rich and cruel, wrapping itself around Elena's chest like a reminder she hadn't asked for. Her daughter sat to her left, legs swinging beneath the chair, pretending not to stare at the neighboring table where a boy her age had just been handed a towering burger, glossy cheese sliding down the sides, thick bun pressed warm between 2 eager hands. Sophia's eyes flicked toward it and back again, quick as guilt. Her son sat across from Elena, elbows tucked too close to his body, eyes fixed on the plate as if staring hard enough might make the fries multiply. They didn't complain. That was what broke her. Children should complain. Children should be messy with wants, loud with hunger, reckless with hope. But her children had learned to swallow their needs quietly, as if trying not to make her life harder than it already was. "Mom," Sophia said softly, her voice careful, the way she spoke when she could feel Elena's tiredness hanging in the air. "You didn't eat." "I'm not hungry," Elena replied instantly. The lie came too easily, smooth and practiced, like a line she'd memorized years ago. She forced a small smile and pushed the plate closer to them. Her fingers split the fries again, nails chipped, hands tired. 3 for Sophia, 3 for Matteo, none for herself. Matteo hesitated before taking his first one, as if he could feel the unfairness in the air. He looked up at her with those wide eyes that always seemed too old for his face. "Are you sure?" he asked. Elena nodded once. "Eat, baby." They chewed slowly, stretching the moment, and Elena's stomach twisted, not from hunger alone, but from the quiet humiliation of knowing that a room full of people could sit this close and never guess that this was a feast in her world. Across the restaurant, a man sat alone at a polished wooden table meant for 4. He hadn't touched his food either. The steak in front of him had gone cold, its juices congealing beneath the knife like a stopped heartbeat. A glass of expensive red wine sat untouched at his right hand. His suit jacket was draped neatly over the back of his chair, tailored perfectly, the kind of fabric that didn't wrinkle easily and probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent. He watched nothing, not the waitstaff weaving between tables with practiced smiles, not the couples leaning toward each other in laughter, not the families breaking bread without counting. His eyes were fixed on the empty chair across from him, like he was waiting for someone who had promised to show up and never did. The waitress had asked if he was waiting for someone. He had said no, and yet he sat as if he were. Elena noticed him only because Matteo followed her gaze. Children were honest that way. They saw loneliness the way adults saw mess, impossible to ignore, impossible not to name. "Why is that man sad?" Matteo whispered, leaning closer. Elena startled and pulled her eyes away too quickly, like she'd been caught staring at someone's wound. "He's not sad," she said. "He's just thinking." Matteo frowned, taking another fry. "He looks like he forgot how to eat." Elena's mouth lifted into a thin, tired smile. "Finish your fries." The man across the room, Adrian Cole, CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech firms in the city, though no one here knew that, finally moved. He lifted his wine glass, took a sip, then set it down again with a soft clink. It tasted like nothing. He had eaten in restaurants like this all over the world, Michelin stars, private dining rooms, chefs flown in just to impress him. Tonight, he'd chosen this place not because it was special, but because it was ordinary. Ordinary felt safer. Ordinary asked nothing of him. Still, something tugged at his attention. A quiet disturbance in the rhythm of the room, like a wrong note in a song everyone else ignored. He turned his head without fully meaning to and saw the plate, the children, the woman. The way she split the food without hesitation, hands steady, face carefully neutral. The way she didn't take a single fry for herself. Adrian knew numbers. He knew patterns. He knew scarcity when he saw it. And he knew that look. The look of someone pretending everything was fine. His jaw tightened. He looked away, irritated with himself. He hadn't come here to notice people. He'd come to disappear into a crowd, to be nothing more than a man eating dinner. But invisibility was a luxury he'd lost years ago, the day his company's valuation crossed into headlines. Even unrecognized, the weight followed him. He felt it in his shoulders, in the way he sat as though bracing for impact. He picked up his knife, cut into the steak, then stopped again. The food felt obscene. At Elena's table, the fries disappeared too quickly. Sophia licked salt from her fingers. Matteo wiped his mouth on his sleeve, pretending it didn't matter, that his stomach still wasn't full. "Can we get water?" Sophia asked. Elena nodded and raised her hand slightly, careful not to draw attention. Water was free. Water filled space. Water created the illusion of fullness. The waitress approached with a practiced smile that flickered when her eyes dropped to the empty plate. "Everything okay here?" "Yes," Elena said quickly. "Perfect." The word tasted bitter. As the waitress walked away, Elena felt the familiar pressure building behind her eyes. She focused on breathing. In, out. Not here, not now. She had cried enough in grocery store parking lots and darkened bedrooms, her forehead pressed to steering wheels and counters, whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone heard. She wouldn't let her children see it in public. Matteo leaned closer, his voice barely a breath. "Mom, are we going home now?" "Soon," Elena said. "Just a minute." She reached into her worn purse beneath the table, fingers blushing the folded bills she'd counted twice before coming in. Enough for one plate. Enough to let her children feel normal for half an hour. Not enough for dessert. Not enough for her. Across the room, Adrian stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, drawing glances. He didn't care. He grabbed his jacket, hesitated, then left it behind. The steak, the wine, the untouched abundance. Abandoned like a life he didn't recognize anymore. He took 3 steps toward the door, then stopped. Something twisted inside him, sharp, unexpected. A memory surfaced without warning. His mother at a kitchen table years ago, cutting a sandwich in half and pushing it toward him, insisting she'd already eaten. The way her eyes had looked when she thought he wasn't watching. The way she smiled like it was nothing while her stomach growled loud enough to fill the room. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he turned. He walked toward Elena's table. Elena noticed the shadow first, long and deliberate across the floor. She looked up, her heart lurching. The man stopped beside them. Up close, he looked older than she'd thought. Not in years, but in weight. His eyes were dark, tired in a way sleep didn't fix. His face carried the practiced control of someone who'd learned how to survive rooms full of strangers. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low and controlled, careful not to disturb their fragile space. "May I?" He gestured to the empty chair. Elena froze. Her children stared openly now, mouths slightly parted. Curiosity wide and fearless. Elena began, then stopped. The instinct to say no rose fast and sharp. Pride, fear, habit. The knowledge that accepting anything from a stranger could come with strings she couldn't afford. But something in his posture, uncertain, almost careful, held her still. He didn't look like a predator. He looked like someone asking permission to breathe. "It's fine," she said finally, cautious. If you want. Adrian exhaled, relief flickering across his face before he masked it. He pulled out the chair and sat, folding his hands together like someone unsure where they belonged. I didn't mean to interrupt, he said. I just didn't want to eat alone tonight. Silence hovered. Elena nodded slowly. Neither did we. The honesty surprised them both, slipping out before pride could catch it. Sophia broke the quiet first. You didn't eat your food either. Adrian glanced back at his abandoned table, then returned his gaze to her. I lost my appetite. Sophia studied him seriously, then nudged their empty plate toward him. We shared. Adrian blinked. The plate was clean except for a smear of ketchup and a few grains of salt. Still, it felt like an offering, like a child handing him the last warm piece of something sacred. Something tight loosened in his chest. Thank you, he said softly, though he wasn't sure why. The waitress returned with water, paused mid-step when she saw Adrian at the table. Recognition flickered briefly in her eyes, then confusion. Professional instinct snapped into place. Can I get you anything else? Elena opened her mouth to say no, because no was safer, because no was familiar. Adrian spoke first. Yes, he said calmly. Another plate. Whatever they'd like. Elena's hand shot out instinctively, touching his wrist. You don't have to. I know, he said gently, meeting her eyes. I want to. Their gaze locked. In that moment, something fragile passed between them. Not charity, not pity. Something quieter. Permission. Elena withdrew her hand slowly, forcing herself to breathe. Okay, she said. Thank you. The children beamed, as if the world had suddenly remembered them. As the waitress walked away, Elena felt her shoulders sag for the first time all evening. She didn't know this man. She didn't know why he'd chosen them. She didn't know what the night might become. She only knew that for the first time in weeks, her chest didn't feel quite so tight. Adrian leaned back slightly, watching the children chatter excitedly about what they might order. He felt something unfamiliar settle inside him. Not happiness. Not exactly. Relief. He glanced at Elena. I'm Adrian. Elena, she replied. This is Sophia. And Matteo. Nice to meet you, he said. And the sincerity in his voice surprised even him. The food arrived quickly, too quickly. Plates filled the table, colors and smells bursting into their small space like sudden generosity. Sophia's eyes widened. Matteo's mouth fell open in awe. Elena watched them eat, really eat, laughter returning to their voices like a forgotten language. Her lips pressed together, eyes shining, as she fought the urge to cry. Adrian noticed. Were you okay? He asked quietly. Elena swallowed and nodded. I am now. They ate together after that, slowly. No rush, no pretending. Adrian didn't check his phone. Elena didn't count the minutes. For a brief, impossible moment, the world felt kind. When the plates were empty again, the noise of the restaurant faded into something distant, like the hush before a storm, or a confession. And then Elena looked at Adrian and said in a voice barely above a whisper, I don't know why you chose us tonight. And the room seemed to hold its breath as she waited for his answer. And then Elena looked at Adrian and said in a voice barely above a whisper, I don't know why you chose us tonight. And the room seemed to hold its breath as she waited for his answer. Adrian didn't answer immediately, not because he didn't have words, because every word felt dangerous. He rested his elbows lightly on the edge of the table, fingers interlaced, knuckles pale beneath the soft yellow light. His gaze drifted past Elena, past the children, toward the wide front window where city lights smeared into long, trembling streaks against the glass. Outside, people passed with purpose, coats buttoned, phones in hand, lives already decided for the night. Inside, this small table had become something fragile, unplanned, alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. I didn't choose you, he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. I noticed you. Elena frowned slightly, her brow creasing. There's a difference? Yes, Adrian said, Choosing implies intention, control. He paused, searching himself, surprised by how much he was revealing to a stranger. I wasn't looking for anything tonight. I wasn't trying to do anything noble. But I saw you split your food like it was nothing, like you'd done it 100 times. Elena's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, at the faint lines of old scars and calluses that told stories she rarely shared. I grew up with that, Adrian continued, not knowing if the next meal was guaranteed. Watching someone else pretend they weren't hungry so I could be. His voice softened, roughened. I recognized it before I could stop myself. Sophia slowed her eating, listening now. Mateo stopped mid-bite, his attention fixed fully on Adrian, fries forgotten. You're rich, Mateo said bluntly, pointing at Adrian's watch, his tone curious rather than accusing. Elena inhaled sharply. Mateo, it's okay, Adrian said, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. He's not wrong. Mateo leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then why are you sad? The question landed harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. Adrian felt it strike somewhere deep, somewhere unarmored. He let out a slow breath, the kind he usually took only when he was alone. Because money doesn't feed the parts of you that remember being small, he said. It doesn't quiet the fear that never learned how to leave. Silence settled again, heavier this time, but not uncomfortable. It felt honest, like a truth laid gently between them instead of thrown. Elena studied him closely. She wasn't looking at his suit now, or his watch, or the confidence that clung to him out of habit. She was looking at his eyes. She saw the truth there, not performative, not rehearsed, real, worn smooth by time and responsibility. You don't look like someone who sits with strangers, she said slowly. I'm not, Adrian admitted. I usually sit with people who want something from me. Investors, partners, people measuring what I'm worth to them. And tonight? Elena asked. Tonight, he said, meeting her gaze fully. No one here knows my name. She nodded, understanding more than she expected. That can feel like oxygen. Yes, he said quietly. Exactly. The waitress returned, placing the bill discreetly near Adrian's elbow, as if she already knew how this would go. Adrian glanced at it once, barely registering the number, then slid it beneath his hand. Elena noticed immediately. Her head shook almost without permission. I can't let you do that. You can, Adrian said gently, and you will. Her lips pressed together. Pride flared, sharp, instinctive, protective. I didn't come here to be rescued. I know, Adrian replied. Neither did I. That stopped her cold. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, placing it face down on the table like a boundary. This isn't charity, he said. This is two people eating at the same table. I invited myself. The meal's on me. Elena hesitated, every muscle tense. Then she nodded once, slow and deliberate. Thank you. The word carried weight. Not desperation, recognition. The children finished their plates with the kind of satisfaction that only comes when hunger is finally answered. Sophia leaned back in her chair, sighing happily. Mateo swung his legs again, energy restored, cheeks flushed with warmth. Can we get dessert? Sophia asked hopefully, then immediately glanced at Elena, uncertainty flickering across her face like a shadow. Elena looked at her daughter, at the crumbs on her lips, at the small miracle of a full stomach. She smiled, a real one this time, warm and unguarded. Yes, she said, we can. Adrian raised an eyebrow, amused. What's your favorite? Chocolate cake, Sophia said without hesitation. 2 forks, Mateo added. Sharing is better. Adrian laughed softly, surprised by the sound of it. It felt rusty, like a muscle he hadn't used in years, but it felt good. When the cake arrived, dark, rich, unapologetically indulgent, Elena watched her children dig in, joy unfiltered. Chocolate smudged Mateo's cheek. Sophia closed her eyes at the first bite. Elena felt something inside her loosen, like a knot finally given permission to unravel. Adrian took a small bite himself. It tasted better than any dessert he'd had in years. Because it wasn't about the cake. "Do you live nearby?" he asked Elena, resting his fork on the plate. "A few blocks," she said. "Small place, but it's ours." He nodded slowly. "That matters." She studied him, curiosity edging past caution. "What about you?" Adrian smiled faintly. "I live in a building that's too big." "Does that matter?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "Mostly it echoes." A check came back signed, settled, invisible. Adrian stood and retrieved his jacket at last, slipping it on like armor he wasn't sure he wanted anymore. Elena gathered her children's coats, helping Sophia into hers, tugging Mateo's sleeves straight. The night outside crest close to the windows. Cool, honest, waiting. They stood together at the entrance, an awkward pause stretching between them. Moments like this usually dissolved without meaning. Strangers returning to separate lives without consequence. Elena broke it. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "Not just the food." Adrian nodded once. "Thank you for letting me sit." Sophia tugged at Elena's sleeve, her voice bright and fearless. "Can we see him again?" The innocence of it stunned them both. Adrian crouched slightly, so he was level with her. "I'd like that," he said, and meant it. Mateo grinned. "You should come to our place. Mom makes the best soup." Elena flushed, embarrassed. "Mateo." "I'd love that," Adrian said simply. The word lingered between them, impossible and sincere. They stepped outside together. Streetlights hummed overhead. The city exhaled around them, traffic rushing somewhere beyond the block. The night wide and open. Cold air brushed Elena's face, clearing the last of the restaurant's warmth. For a moment, none of them moved. Adrian cleared his throat. "If you're comfortable," he said carefully, "I could walk you home." Elena looked down the quiet street, at the children beside her, at the man who had done nothing but offer presents without demand. "Yes," she said, "that would be nice." They walked slowly, footsteps sinking without effort. Sophia skipped ahead, spinning once before darting forward again. Mateo talked non-stop about school and cartoons and the cake, his voice filling the space like music. Elena and Adrian walked side by side, close but not touching. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was observant, curious, charged. "You didn't ask what I do," Adrian said after a moment. She shrugged lightly. "Does it matter?" He smiled, something soft in his eyes. "No." They stopped at her building, a modest brick structure with warm windows glowing like promises stacked on top of each other. "This is us," Elena said. Adrian nodded, hands tucked into his pockets. "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Adrian." Sophia stepped forward without warning and wrapped her arms around his waist in a quick, fierce hug. Mateo followed, less graceful but just as sincere. Adrian froze for half a second, then laughed softly and returned the embrace, careful and gentle. As Elena ushered the children inside, she turned once more. Adrian stood there, watching the door like it held something sacred. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone standing in the dark, because something inside him had quietly decided this night wasn't over yet. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel alone standing in the dark, because something inside him had quietly decided this night wasn't over yet. Adrian stayed there longer than he needed to. The street was quiet now, the kind of quiet that arrived late, when even the city seemed to lower its voice out of respect for private thoughts. A bus hissed somewhere in the distance, brakes sighing like an exhausted breath. A dog barked once, sharp and lonely, then fell silent. Life continued, indifferent, steady, unaware that something had shifted on this small stretch of pavement. He could have turned away. He could have gone back to his building of glass and steel, to the elevator that rose without asking questions, to the silence that waited patiently for him every night. He knew that silence well, It had become familiar, predictable, almost polite. Instead, he stood still. He watched the light flicker on behind one of the windows above the entrance. Then another. Shadows moved, small, energetic, uncontained. Children. He imagined coats being tossed aside, shoes kicked off, laughter echoing briefly before being hushed. A smile tugged at his mouth before he could stop it. Inside the apartment, Elena leaned against the door after locking it, her palm flat against the wood as if grounding herself. The hallway smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old paint, comforting, lived-in scents. Sophia shrugged off her jacket and hung it carefully, always careful. Matteo kicked off his shoes and ran toward the couch, already halfway into a leap. "Mom," Sophia said, her voice buzzing with excitement she hadn't tried to hide. "He was nice." Elena exhaled slowly, the breath she'd been holding all evening finally released. "Yes," she said. "He was." Matteo bounced on the couch, cushions squeaking in protest. "He didn't talk like grown-ups on TV." Elena smiled, untying her scarf. "No," she agreed, "he didn't." She moved toward the small kitchen and flicked on the light. The space was narrow but clean, every inch used with intention. A pot sat drying on the counter. Tomorrow's lunchboxes waited half-prepared, lids stacked neatly like quiet promises. Her phone buzzed. Elena froze. For a split second, her chest tightened, the old reflex. Bad news, unpaid bills, school reminders, messages that never seemed to arrive with relief. She reached into her pocket anyway, fingers stiff. Unknown number. She stared at the screen as if it might change its mind. Sophia peeked over her shoulder. "Is it him?" Elena blinked. "I don't know." Her thumb hovered, heart beating a little too fast. Then she pressed accept. "Hello?" "Hi," Adrian's voice came through, softer now, uncertain, like he wasn't sure he was welcome in this space. "It's Adrian. I hope this isn't strange. The waitress, she gave me your number." Elena's heart stuttered. She shouldn't have done that. "I know," he said quickly. "I asked her not to, but she thought—" He stopped himself. "I'm sorry, I can hang up." "No," Elena said, surprising herself with how quickly the word came. "It's okay." A pause followed, filled with small sounds, his breathing, the faint hum of the street on his end. "I just wanted to make sure you got home safely," Adrian said. Elena leaned back against the counter, the cool surface pressing into her spine, steadying her. "We did. Thank you. I'm glad." Silence stretched between them, not awkward, not forced, comfortable, like a shared pause in music. Sophia waved enthusiastically at the phone. "Hi." Adrian laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Hi, Sophia," Matteo shouted from the couch, his voice carrying easily. "Did you eat your steak yet?" Adrian smiled to himself. "Not yet." "You should," Matteo advised seriously. "Food shouldn't be lonely." Elena closed her eyes briefly, a smile tugging at her lips. "You have wise children," Adrian said. "They've had to be," she replied quietly. Another pause followed, deeper this time, heavier with meaning. "Would it be all right?" Adrian said slowly, choosing each word with care. "If I called you again sometime?" Elena hesitated. She thought of unfinished conversations, of doors she'd closed to survive, of how careful she'd learned to be with hope. She thought of all the times she'd told herself not to want too much. "Yes," she said at last. "That would be all right." They said goodnight again, softer this time, like something fragile had been placed between them. The call ended. Elena stared at the dark screen, something warm spreading through her chest. Cautious, unfamiliar, undeniable. Outside, Adrian finally turned away. He walked not toward his usual route, but aimlessly, letting the city guide him. His phone felt heavier in his pocket now, not with emails or demands, but with possibility. He walked longer than necessary, letting the cool night air clear his head. Eventually, he reached his apartment. The lobby was empty, the security desk unattended. The elevator hummed as it carried him upward, mirrors reflecting a man who looked different than he had an hour ago. Less guarded, more present. His place greeted him the same way it always did, quiet, pristine, untouched. Lights turned on automatically. The air smelled faintly of nothing at all. He set his keys down, removed his jacket, loosened his tie. Then he stopped. On the kitchen counter, a takeout container sat unopened from earlier that day, condensation drying along the edges. He stared at it, then pushed it aside and opened the fridge. He pulled out eggs, bread, simple things. He cooked. The act felt strange, almost foreign. He burned the toast slightly and didn't care. The eggs were uneven, the pan too hot. It didn't matter. As he ate at the kitchen island, he thought of a small table crowded with plates, of laughter spilling without permission, of children who reminded him that hunger wasn't always about food. He slept better that night than he had in years. Morning came gently. Sunlight crept across Elena's living room floor as Sophia padded out in socks, rubbing her eyes. Matteo followed, dragging a blanket behind him like a loyal shadow. "School day," Elena called softly from the kitchen. Groans answered in unison. Breakfast was simple: toast, jam, apples sliced thin. Elena moved through the motions with a steadiness that felt different, lighter, somehow. As she packed lunches, her phone buzzed again. A message. "Adrian, good morning. I hope today is kind to you." Elena stared at the words for a moment, then typed back. "Elena, good morning. We're okay, thank you." She hesitated, then added, "The kids say hello." 3 dots appeared almost instantly. "Adrian, please tell them hello back, and good luck today." Elena smiled, a quiet thing that stayed with her as the day unfolded. Work, errands, responsibility. The world didn't soften overnight, but something underneath it all had shifted. The weight felt distributed now, shared with a moment she could return to when things felt too heavy. That evening, Adrian called again. They talked longer this time, about small things that felt safe. Music they both liked, bad movies they secretly loved, favorite soups. He didn't tell her about board meetings. She didn't tell him about overdue notices. They didn't need to. Days passed, then more. Their conversations became a quiet ritual. Sometimes brief, just a check-in, a shared laugh. Sometimes stretching into the night, laughter surprising them both. One evening, Adrian stood outside her building again. This time he knocked. Elena opened the door, her heart racing, a strange mix of anticipation and calm settling in her chest. "Hi," he said. "Hi." The children appeared instantly, curiosity bright and unfiltered. "You came," Sophia said. "I promised," Adrian replied. He stepped inside. The apartment felt smaller than he remembered, but warmer than anything he owned. The smell of soup filled the air, rich and comforting. They ate together again, this time at Elena's table. Bowls clinked, bread was passed, no one counted. Adrian watched Elena move through the space, confident here, grounded. Sure of herself in ways the world outside rarely allowed. This was her world. She had built it from fragments and determination. After dinner, the children drifted toward the couch, sleep heavy on their eyelids. Matteo yawned mid-sentence. Sophia curled up with a book she wouldn't finish. Elena walked Adrian to the door. "Thank you," she said, "for coming." "Thank you for letting me," he replied. They stood close, too close to ignore the electricity humming between them. "Elena?" Adrian said, his voice low. "I don't want to disappear after this. I don't want tonight to be an exception." She met his gaze, steady and honest. "Then don't make it one." Their breath mingled in the narrow space. He didn't touch her. Not yet. "May I see you again?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He left then, his heart pounding, knowing something fragile and real had begun, and that neither of them could pretend anymore that this was just about one shared plate in a restaurant. Because it wasn't. It was about what came after. Because it wasn't. It was about what came after. The days that followed didn't announce themselves as important. They arrived quietly, disguised as routine. Morning light slid across Elena's kitchen tiles. Shoes lined up by the door. Lunches packed with careful efficiency. Buses caught just in time. Adrian returned to his world of meetings and screens. Elena returned to hers of schedules and endurance. On the surface, nothing dramatic changed. But underneath, something fundamental had shifted. Adrian no longer rushed through his evenings. He didn't fill the silence with noise or work. He found himself waiting, not anxiously, not desperately, for the sound of his phone. When Elena's name appeared, the tension he carried loosened in ways nothing else managed. He listened more than he spoke. He asked questions he had never learned to ask before. Elena noticed it too. The way her shoulders relaxed when she laughed. The way the future stopped feeling like a narrow hallway she had to walk alone. She didn't tell herself stories about forever. She had learned not to. She simply allowed now to be good, and let that be enough. One evening, rain poured hard enough to blur the city into streaks of gray. Adrian stood under the awning outside Elena's building, coat already soaked, hair damp, breathing fast from the walk. He hadn't planned it. He had simply found himself there. She opened the door and laughed softly. "You're going to catch a cold. I wanted to see you," he said, unapologetic. She stepped aside. "Then come in." They sat at the small table again. Tea this time, steam rising. The children were asleep, their door cracked open, soft breathing drifting down the hallway like proof that peace could exist in small places. Adrian cradled the mug between his hands. "I had a meeting today," he said. Elena waited. She had learned when to let silence do the work. "They offered me a new contract," he continued. "Expansion, more cities, more time away." "And?" she asked gently. And for the first time, he said, eyes fixed on the swirling liquid. "I didn't answer immediately." That caught her attention. "I realized something," Adrian went on. "I've spent my life building something enormous, thinking size meant security, thinking if it was big enough, nothing could break it. But the bigger it got, the smaller everything else felt." Elena nodded slowly. "Sometimes survival teaches you how to build walls," she said, "but not how to live inside them." He looked at her then, really looked. "You live inside your life," he said, "even when it's hard." She smiled faintly. "I didn't have a choice." "You always do," he said softly. "You just chose courage." The words settled between them. Rain tapped the windows. The apartment glowed warm and contained, like a world held together by intention. Adrian reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. He paused, giving her space. "Elena," he said, voice steady but careful. "I don't want to be someone who passes through your life and leaves a memory. I want to be someone who stays." Her breath caught. She didn't answer right away. She thought of late nights and early mornings, of disappointments she had survived, of the children asleep down the hall, their hearts open in ways hers had learned to guard. "I won't let you save us," she said quietly. He nodded immediately. "I wouldn't try." "I won't be an escape," she continued, "or a charity project, or a chapter you outgrow." His jaw tightened, not in anger, but understanding. "I don't need saving," she said, "and neither do my kids." "I know," Adrian said. "That's why I'm here." Silence again, heavy, honest. Finally, Elena reached forward and placed her hand over his. "Then stay," she said. The word carried weight, not romance, commitment. Adrian closed his eyes briefly, absorbing it. "I will," he said. From that night on, their lives began to intertwine. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but deliberately. Adrian learned the rhythms of Elena's world. School pickups, grocery lists, budget conversations that didn't scare him, but humbled him. He didn't offer solutions unless asked. He listened. He learned when to step forward and when to stand back. Elena learned Adrian's quiet habits, how he needed a few minutes of silence after long days, how he sometimes stared out windows when thinking, as if grounding himself in something solid, how praise made him uncomfortable, but trust did not. The children accepted him without hesitation. Mateo asked endless questions, testing him with the seriousness of a small guardian. Sophia watched carefully, thoughtful beyond her years. She noticed that Adrian never raised his voice, that he never spoke over Elena, that when Elena felt overwhelmed, Adrian didn't tell her to calm down, he simply helped. One night, as Adrian helped with homework, Sophia looked up at him and said, "You're not lonely anymore." He swallowed. "No," he said, "I'm not." Weeks passed, then months. The restaurant where they'd first met remained unchanged. Same lights, same tables. The same soft hum of ordinary life. One evening, Elena suggested they go back. Adrian hesitated at first, then agreed. They sat at the same table. This time, they ordered without counting. The waitress smiled, recognizing them. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Elena reached for her water, paused, and laughed softly. "Do you remember that night?" "I remember everything," Adrian said. "The fries," she said. "I was terrified." "And I was empty," he replied, "in every way that mattered." She met his gaze. "Funny how hunger brings people together. Funny how sharing heals it," he said. They didn't rush the meal. Outside, the city pulsed. Inside, something steady held. Later that night, as they walked home, Adrian stopped beneath a streetlight. The glow painted their faces in soft gold. "Elena," he said. "Yes, I want to make one thing clear," he said. "My life will always be complicated. My work will always demand things from me." She nodded. "So will mine. I won't promise perfection," he continued. "But I promise presence," she smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." He reached into his pocket, not for a ring, not for anything symbolic, but for her hand. She took it. Their fingers fit. Seasons changed. Winter softened into spring. Jackets were shed. Windows opened. Laughter spilled easier. The children grew a little taller. The world continued doing what it did best, moving forward. One afternoon, Adrian stood in Elena's kitchen, watching her move between stove and counter. Humming softly, the children argued over a board game in the living room, voices overlapping in familiar chaos. This ordinary noise felt miraculous. "I turned down the expansion," Adrian said casually. She stopped mid-step. "What?" "I restructured," he corrected. "Delegated. Made space." "For us?" she asked carefully. "For a life," he said. "One that includes you if you'll have me." She crossed the room and kissed him then. Slow, deliberate, certain. "Yes," she said. Years later, if anyone asked how they met, the story was always simple. A shared table, a shared plate. But the truth was deeper. They met at the exact moment they were both ready to be seen. One night, long after the children had grown and the city outside had changed its face, Adrian and Elena sat together on the balcony of a home they had chosen. Not large, not small, just right. Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about that first night?" "All the time," he said. "What do you think would have happened if you hadn't sat down?" Adrian smiled softly. "I think I would have kept eating alone and thought that was living." She squeezed his hand. Below them, the city lights shimmered. Inside, warmth waited, and the loneliness that had once defined them both had no place left to exist, because it had been replaced slowly and deliberately by something far more powerful: belonging.